This is the elephant, the largest animal in Africa. They'll punt lions, kick rhinos, crush entire trees. So if they're so big and strong, why are they running from a bee? Well, the most obvious assumption people make is that an elephant shouldn't even be able to feel a bee sting in the first place. We all know elephants have notoriously thick skin. It's literally what they're famous for. Across their back and their sides, their skin is over an inch thick, and it's incredibly dense. A bee stinger is only about 3 millimeters long. If a bee tries to sting an elephant on the back, the stinger can't even pierce deep enough to reach the bloodstream. It just doesn't work. But obviously, having thick skin on your back doesn't somehow make you immune to getting stung everywhere else. Elephants are absolutely massive, but they still have highly exposed weak points. Their skin isn't an inch thick everywhere. Around their eyes, their skin is actually incredibly thin. The tissue inside their mouth is completely soft, and the area right behind their giant ears is totally exposed. And bees know this. When bees attack a large mammal, they don't just randomly dive bomb the thickest part of the animal's back. They're hardwired to go for dark, moist areas. They go directly for the eyes. They go for the mouth. They go behind the ears. Getting stung in the eye is incredibly painful for literally anything, no matter how big you are.
That's going to do a bit more than tickle.
But having exposed eyes isn't exactly unique to elephants. Every single animal in the savannah has eyes and a mouth. So why are elephants specifically so uniquely terrified of these bugs? Well, the answer is right on their face. The elephant's trunk is basically the most important part of their entire body. It has over 40,000 individual muscles in it. To put that in perspective, the entire human body only has about 600 muscles total. Their trunk is incredibly strong, but it's also insanely sensitive. They use it to breathe, they use it to smell predators, they use it to pick up tiny pieces of food, and they use it to suck up gallons of water to drink. It's essentially their hand, their nose, and their mouth all combined into one. And the inside of that trunk is completely lined with soft tissue. If a bee flies up inside an elephant's trunk and stings them, it's a massive problem. Because when you get stung by a bee, the area swells up. If an elephant gets stung repeatedly inside their trunk, the interior tissue starts to swell. And if that tissue swells too much, the elephant literally cannot breathe properly. They can't smell, and most importantly, they can't suck up water. If their trunk is compromised, they basically can't do anything. A severe sting inside the trunk can prevent an elephant from drinking water for days. So getting stung inside your nose is a complete nightmare for an elephant. But honestly, one single bee sting isn't going to instantly swell an entire trunk shut.
So what's the real threat here?
Well, the problem is, you're never dealing with just one bee. The elephants in Africa aren't dealing with the calm, friendly bees you might see pollinating a garden. They're dealing with African honeybees, and African honeybees are notoriously aggressive. If you accidentally disturb their hive, they don't just send out 1 or 2 guard bees to warn you to get away. They send out a swarm. And worse, when an African honeybee stings you, it doesn't just hurt. The bee actually releases a chemical alarm pheromone into the air. The pheromone smells distinctly like bananas, and it basically acts as a target marker. So if you're ever out in the savannah and suddenly smell bananas, you should probably run. The moment that bee first stings an elephant and releases the pheromone, it instantly signals every other bee in a huge radius. It tells the entire hive exactly where the threat is, and it tells them to attack that specific spot. The elephant knows that one single bee means 10,000 more are about to arrive in the next 5 seconds. And all 10,000 of those bees are going to smell the pheromone, fly directly at the elephant's face, and try to sting them in the eyes and up their trunk. That's what the elephant is actually running from. But realistically, could 10,000 bees actually take down an elephant? If a fully grown adult elephant gets swarmed by bees, they're going to be in absolute agony. Their eyes will swell shut, their trunk will be in immense pain, and they'll be miserable. But they aren't going to die. An adult elephant simply has too much body mass for the bee venom to actually kill them. It takes a massive amount of venom to shut down a 14,000 pound animal, and even a massive swarm usually can't deliver enough to actually kill an adult. But the adults aren't just running for themselves. Elephant herds are highly social, and they're almost always traveling with babies. And elephant calves don't have the body mass to survive a swarm. Their skin is much thinner, they're much smaller, and a massive swarm of African honeybees absolutely can kill an elephant calf. So that sheer panic you see from the adult elephants is actually a hardwired parental instinct. If a swarm descends on the herd, the babies are in lethal danger. The adult knows this, and their immediate reaction is to get the entire family out the area as fast as physically possible. And to do this, they need a way to tell everyone to move. When an elephant spots a predator like a lion, they might make some noise, but they genuinely just group up and stand their ground. But bees require a completely different strategy. You can't stand your ground against a swarm. You can't just look at a cloud of bees and go, "Yeah, try me bro." You have to run. And elephants are so intelligent that they actually have a specific sound entirely dedicated to bees. This rumble is so low that human ears can barely even pick it up, but it travels incredibly fast through the ground and the air. This is essentially a specific word in the elephant vocabulary that means, bees. When the rest of the herd hears this specific rumble, they don't look around for lions. They don't look for humans. They instantly start shaking their heads, flapping their ears, and running away. They know exactly what the threat is just from the sound of the rumble. And honestly, you might be thinking that elephants are just being overly dramatic. They're the biggest animals around, so running away from bugs seems a little embarrassing. But what about the other tough guys in Africa? If an elephant runs from bees, how does something like a lion handle them? Lions are the apex predators of the savannah. They're fearless, they hunt massive prey, and they literally sleep out in the open because nothing hunts them. But if a lion pride accidentally bumps into an African honeybee hive, they will also run. Lions might have thick fur, but their noses, their eyes, and the insides of their ears are completely exposed. And unlike elephants, lions don't have a giant trunk to cover their face. When the bees swarm, the lions will swat at their own faces for about 2 seconds before realizing it's completely useless, and then they just sprint away into the brush. Keep in mind though, they're nowhere near as dramatic as elephants. Lions get pretty annoyed, but aren't usually freaking out at the sign of just a little buzz. What about a rhino? Rhinos are massive, heavy, and extremely well armored. They have terrible eyesight and usually just charge at whatever annoys them. But you can't charge a bee. If a rhino disturbs a hive, they'll usually just ignore it until it becomes a massive swarm, and then they'll just have to run away. Because they can't see well in the first place, getting stung in the eyes makes them really disorientated. They'll literally run full speed into trees and bushes, just trying to scrape the bees off their face. So yeah, the elephant isn't completely dramatic. African honeybees are genuinely feared by absolutely everything in the ecosystem. But still, an elephant is huge. Why don't they just fight back? If a crocodile bites an elephant's trunk, the elephant just drags the crocodile out of the water and stomps on it. If a rhino gets too close, the elephant just flips the rhino over. So if bees are attacking, why doesn't the elephant just crush the hive? Or use those massive ears to just swat the swarm out of the air? Well, because brute force is completely useless against a swarm. You cannot punch a cloud. If an elephant tries to stomp on a beehive, they're just going to put their foot directly onto the source of the swarm, which guarantees thousands of bees will instantly fly straight up into their face. And when you're fighting an entire hive of angry bees, stomping directly on their house is a really bad idea. If they try to swat the bees with their ears, they're just fanning the alarm pheromone around, spreading the scent and making the bees even more aggressive. You just can't physically fight a bunch of tiny flying bugs. The only actual defense an elephant has against bees is dust. If you watch an elephant getting swarmed, they'll often use their trunk to scoop up massive piles of dirt and throw it over their own backs and heads. The dust coats their skin, confuses the bees, and masks the smell of the alarm pheromone. But even that is just a stalling tactic. Dust doesn't kill the bees. Their best and really only option is always just to run. But what happens after they run away? We've all heard the phrase, "an elephant never forgets." And usually, people apply that to elephants remembering where water is during a drought, or recognizing humans they met decades ago. But that memory applies to threats too. When an elephant herd gets swarmed by bees, they'll mentally map exactly where that hive was. Researchers tracking elephant migrations have noticed that herds will literally change their entire path just to avoid specific trees or specific areas where they've encountered aggressive bees in the past. They'll literally walk miles out of their way just to avoid a patch of trees that might have a hive in it. They don't even need to go near them. They just see the tree from a mile away and go, "Nope, we're walking around." This fear is so strong that it literally changes how they live. They don't need to see the bees to be afraid of an area. They just know the area is dangerous and they refuse to go near it. And scientists actually found a way to test exactly how deep this fear goes. To understand just how hardwired this terror is, researchers set up a brilliant experiment in Kenya. They found a herd of elephants resting peacefully under some trees. Then they took a fake speaker, hid it in the brush nearby, and simply played an audio recording of angry bees. There were no actual bees around. There was no alarm pheromone in the air. There was no physical threat at all, just the sound. The exact second the audio started playing, the entire herd stopped what they were doing. The matriarch of the herd immediately made that specific bee alarm rumble we talked about earlier. Within seconds, the entire herd turned and fled. They ran away from an empty speaker. This proved that the elephants don't want to get stung. They don't wait to smell the pheromones. The mere sound of a bee is enough to trigger a full-scale evacuation. They're so terrified that just the noise alone makes them run. And this weird quirk is actually incredibly important, because right now, this exact fear of bees is solving one of the biggest problems in Africa. As human populations expand in Africa, humans are building farms and villages right in the middle of where elephants usually walk. And this creates a huge problem. Elephants eat hundreds of pounds of food every single day. When a herd of elephants is walking through the savannah and they suddenly come across a human farm growing corn or tomatoes or watermelons, they don't see property lines. All they see is food. A single herd of elephants can walk into a farm at night and completely destroy an entire year's worth of crops in a few hours. They eat the food, they trample the fences, and they ruin the farmer's entire livelihood. And obviously, the farmers can't just let their families starve. So they retaliate. Farmers will throw rocks, light fires, and eventually they resort to using poisons or guns to kill the elephants. And this creates a situation where absolutely everybody loses. The farmers lose their crops and the elephants get killed. And physically stopping an elephant is basically impossible. You can build a wooden fence, but a 14,000-pound animal will just walk right through it like it isn't even there. You can build an electric fence, but elephants are so smart that they will literally use tree branches to break the wires without getting shocked. Nothing physical can stop a hungry elephant. So how do you keep them out? Since elephants are terrified of bees, a zoologist named Dr. Lucy King came up with a brilliant idea. Instead of building a fence out of wood or metal, why not build a fence out of bees? The design is incredibly simple. Farmers set up wooden posts around the perimeter of their crops. But instead of stringing heavy metal wire between the posts, they'll hang active beehives on the wire. The hives are spaced about 10 meters apart, and they're all connected by a single string of wire. If an elephant tries to sneak into the farm at night, they'll inevitably bump into the wire. And when they push the wire, it physically swings all the beehives hanging on the fence. The swinging motion instantly wakes up the African honeybees inside. The bees get angry, they start buzzing loudly, and they swarm out of the hives. The elephant hears the buzzing, remembers exactly what that sound means, and immediately turns around and runs away. So, the largest land animal in the world is being stopped by the smallest. You're using a tiny bug as a barricade against a 14,000-pound giant. And the crazy part is, it actually works. The simple system of hanging boxes on a wire is completely changing how we handle this problem. For starters, these beehive fences stop over 80% of elephant crop raids. The elephants bump the wire, hear the bees, and simply decide the food isn't worth the trouble. And better yet, nobody gets hurt. The elephants don't get shot, they don't get poisoned, and they usually run away before they even get stung. They just get spooked and leave. But the absolute best part of this solution is what it does for the farmers. Their crops are finally safe, and now they own a perimeter of active beehives. Twice a year, the farmers can safely harvest the honey from these fences and sell it at the local market. They call it elephant-friendly honey. It provides an entirely new source of income for people who really need it. By understanding the biology and psychology of the elephant, researchers created a solution that saves the elephants, saves the crops, and actually makes the farmers money. It's infinitely more effective than trying to build a giant wall. But realistically, is it completely foolproof? So the beehives work 80% of the time, but what about that other 20%? Do the fences always work, or are there some elephants out there that just don't care? Well, fear is a powerful motivator, but starvation is stronger. Usually, the herds with babies will run away instantly, but sometimes you get solitary bull elephants. These males are massive, they're stubborn, and sometimes they're incredibly hungry. If a giant bull elephant realizes that there's a field of delicious watermelons right on the other side of that wire, he has to make a choice. He knows the bees are going to hurt. He knows it's going to be miserable, but he also knows that if he closes his eye, tucks his trunk away, and just charges straight through the wire, he can get to the food. He basically just weighs his options and decides, worth it. In these rare cases, the elephant is just too hungry to care. The bull will literally tank the bee stings, smash through the fence, and eat the crops anyway. So the system isn't 100% perfect. If an elephant is hungry enough, they'll endure the pain. But the fact that a few boxes of bugs can deter 80% of the largest land animals on Earth is still absolutely incredible. This all goes to show that true power in nature comes down to knowing exactly where to strike. And honestly, we can't really judge the elephants for running away. Humans like to think of ourselves as the ultimate apex predators of the planet, but if a bee flies a little too close to our ear, most of us will start flailing our arms and running away in pure panic too. Some things are just universally terrifying, no matter how big you are. Thanks for watching, and thank you to everyone who's supporting this second Beyond the Green channel. It's still relatively new, and most people on my main don't even know about it, so I really appreciate all of you who are subscribing and showing love in the comments.